Hey guys, today we're going to be going over building edit screens in your PowerApps application. So for the past few weeks, we've been working on a single application called an onboarding app. And what I'm doing is I'm going over topics and elements of software development while building applications that would apply to any application. So if you haven't been following along, it's okay. All this would apply to your applications as well. And almost any PowerApps application will need an edit screen. Right, Kurt? Right, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's the whole point.
Yeah. So back in the day, my mentor was teaching me. He said, if you can write a record, read a record, feed a record, you could work beside me. That's exactly what happened. He helped me my first job. I worked right beside him, and then my real training started. Skywalker, he started getting some training from Obi-Wan, and then he went to the Dagobah system to find Yoda. That's when his real training began, right? So you learn doing, guys. You don't really learn by watching videos, although I am happy to see all you guys here live with me or watching this on demand. I can only do so much teaching, and I would encourage you, as you watch this video, you bring up PowerApps, you bring up the project that you're working on, and you sort of go through the steps that we're going to be going over today. So reveal number one is we won't be using forms, okay? So I was talking to Kurt early this morning, asked him if he had any ideas of good things to cover, and he said validation. Not many people cover validation, and I remember he taught me validation very well back in the day when he was helping me become a good computer programmer. Keeping an eye on the comments here. I see a lot of good mornings. It's great to see you guys on. So without further ado, let's make ourselves small here and let's look at our database diagram, okay? So we've got a lot of opportunities for edit screens, okay? And we do have some good data among these four tables. And I believe it was maybe 2 weeks ago, we talked about how we did this. Now this is, the data source is Microsoft SQL Server in Azure. Okay, so it's an Azure SQL database. And what we did a few weeks ago is we put data in these four tables, and we did a join, and we put that join, that query inside of a SQL Server view, and then we pulled in that view as a data source. So we're able to look at that. Now, now you're not able to update a view like you can with a database table. So we have to keep our database structure in mind as we're updating. So we're going to be going over this today. So
yeah, so let's before we jump into that, let's just talk about data validation for a minute, and let's talk about data for a minute.
Sure.
If you don't, because I really think you hit a good. You said something really important just a minute ago. Not that everything you say is not important, but this was really important, and that was that not too many people cover data validation. And really, that's probably the thing that is probably the most important thing to cover, because really that's the whole thing we're doing here. In the bottom line of this whole thing is we've got an application, PowerApps, or whatever front end you're using. It's just a front end. It really is a front end to the data. And it's all about, when you're building that front end to the data, it's how are you going to make sure that data, not only are you bringing it up so that you can see it and make sense of it, but more importantly, it's how are you going to put the data in so that the data is clean? Because in the end, it's all about the data. Everything is about the data,
Yes.
And so we have to make sure that data is pristine, as pristine as we possibly can. And if it's not pristine, it's our application's fault. It's our application's fault. So it's the number one rule of every programmer is to make sure that data is validated. And there's all kinds of types of validation in there. And it turns out, I hope that I don't overtalk this thing, because I could probably do 3 live streams on data validation in itself. It's probably the only thing I'm good at. It's out of if I were going to say my programming repertoire, it's all about data for me. And it's all about validating the data. I've learned how to do it. And I really wish this is a great opportunity. I'm really excited, I guess, to talk about this, because I think for people like yourself, Jeff, and people that are beginning in this thing, what a way to start. learning about data first. You know, back in the old days, we used to have not old days, but like when the days of Visual Basic, when it came out, they started binding directly to the database tables. And I was just scared to death when that happened, because when you can start binding directly to the database tables, you're bypassing validation. And you know, when you talk about Excel spreadsheets and you're putting stuff in there, some of you guys out there listening right now, you guys are dealing with Excel spreadsheets or SharePoint lists where people can just get in there in the data and just start putting stuff in there willy-nilly. You don't know what you got. So I guess I said all that to say this is very important live stream. And you got anything to add to that there, Darren, Jeff?
I'm just trying to capture what all the gold you're throwing out, you know?
Okay.
So I'm taking notes here. So fill me. Okay. So the first thing that you said, Kurt, is that data validation is important. And I was sort of maybe paraphrasing. I don't know if you exactly said this, but data is essential in the lifeblood of any organization.
Yep.
Something that I've seen a lot of times with applications, somebody wants to import their Excel spreadsheets or even tie into a mainframe or different data sources, and they put all the data together, and you look at it and there's spaces before the first character, or they're all uppercase or they're all lowercase. And, you know, you've got phone numbers. Some phone numbers have parentheses. Some of them have dashes. Some of them have nothing. Some of them have dots. That's an absolute mess, right?
Yes. Yes. Or people can't understand how come they're lost in the middle of forms, or, you know, I mean, just imagine somebody who's working for somebody like Discover. Somebody's got millions of customers coming in, and they come in there and they're trying to bring up somebody's data, and it's all messed up. They can't get to the record right. You know, it just shuts everything down, shuts it all down. You know, somebody said that data is king, but you know, we've got Elvis is king too. But I really think data is king and Elvis. They're both tied. I bet you Patty would probably agree. Patty would say Elvis is king and as well as data, right, Patty?
Yeah, I'm glad to see Rick. Rick says everything is about the data. Remember that one. And then Jill says, Kurt, you're good at many things, learning so much from Lab 2. Oh, okay.
Well, that's a good plug. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
This week, Kurt did a mic drop and dropped Lab 2 on everybody, and people are having fun with that lab. They also have a guy following you from West Africa, thinks this is high quality content. Well, thanks for joining. Thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. And even Patty says, I definitely agree, Kurt. All right. So
what,
Kurt,
the Lab 2 was great, or that Elvis is king? Which one? No, I'm just teasing. I'm teasing. Okay.
All right. So what did I miss here, Jeff and Kurt, of why data validation is important in our data entry screens?
I think a bullet point would be it's the entire purpose of writing our program. It's the entire purpose of our program, right? Why have the program if you're not? Why not? If you're not going to do the validation to make sure, then why aren't you just going ahead and going into Excel or SQL Server or the database tables and just entering the data right there? You know,
that's exactly right. If yeah, people have Excel spreadsheets. Why not just enter your stuff directly in the database? If that's a really good point there. Okay.
In fact, most people probably that are beginners at this stuff say, well, why don't we do that? Why are we writing these database, these screens? What's the point? Well, that's the point right there. You got to make sure that the data is good. What else is, so it's the lifeblood of an organization. I think that's exactly right. Keep data consistent. Make sure you have no missing data. Yeah, that's really big what you wrote up there too, Darren.
Yeah.
See, we're kind of writing this outline. Some instructors would spend hours and hours writing an outline and then going into a live stream. Nope, not me and Darren. We just say, let's do a live stream. What are we going to talk about today? Let's talk about data. And then we're going to make the outline as we're doing the live stream. If I had to plan out every single live stream or every video that I did, you guys would probably get a tenth of the content. That's right.
You know,
You're right.
You want to, earlier this week, I released a video about a drop-down list control. That took me several days to do in my free time. There was a lot of video editing that went into that. It may not seem like it, but it actually takes longer to edit a video than it does to record it.
Sure.
And there's a lot of thought that goes into something that is really structured and nice. But so yeah, that sort of is a little bit more of an explanation on that. But yeah, if you look at a database table and there's missing data or missing fields, it can really cause confusion later, Yeah, so keeping data consistent. What else? What else were you saying, Kurt, that I missed there?
I'm trying to think. I think you're kind of covering it. Obviously, we have types of data types of validation. You've got pre. So apart from the required field type stuff, you've got pre and post validation. You're trying to, and that's the whole point of your application. Your application is a pre-validating data type validation. Okay, so you're funneling people into the right places so that they don't put the wrong data in. That's number one. You're doing it before you even get started. Another type of pre-validation would be like if you're disabling any buttons to allow them to enter, submit, or save before the data has been checked, right? That's pre-data. So in other words, like say if you have a save button on a form, you're not going to allow that to be enabled before you make sure that all the fields are filled in, right? Maybe you want to make sure that some of the spelling's checked right if you can. Make sure you have the right format for phone numbers and social security numbers or whatnot. Maybe you have currency and you can't have negative numbers. Maybe, I don't know. There's just so many different things. You might have a date range in there. There's so many kinds of data validating things that you have to do. I didn't say that very well. There's so many things that you have to do to validate data. How's that? Sometimes my mind gets going so fast that I can't keep up with my mouth.
Talk faster.
I sound like I got Tourette syndrome or something.
We're going to install one of Elon Musk's brain hookups for you so you can rewind your thoughts.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, you guys. Sometimes I get talking really fast. It's almost too bad that you didn't have a slow it down speech. Sometimes you want to hurry up and speed it up. No, not me. You got to go down the other direction. So you have those are like your pre-validation stuff. Then you got your post-validation. That means, okay, after you leave a field, let's say you put in, maybe you're putting in a birth date and you're checking to make sure that this thing isn't in the future or something. You're after the person's entered the data, you've got to make sure that stuff's right before it goes into the table. There might be some business rules that you have in there where you have to have certain amounts have to be within a range for your fiscal year. So in other words, like maybe you've got a 3-month range in there and you've exceeded that. Well, you're not allowed to put that kind of data in. You've got to make sure you have blockers and limiters in that. So those are just stuff off the top of my head, but there's probably so many more. But it all goes into pre and post, pre-validation versus post-validation. And you got to do both, right? I talk so fast that Darren just gave up. He's like, I can't keep up with this thing.
Well, I mean, so when .NET came out, they had validation controls, and they had like a set of 4 or 5 different types of validation, and coming from a web background, a pre-validation would be validation on the front end, like in JavaScript, in the HTML document inside the browser. And then when you send it to the server, on the server side, ASP.NET is a server-side technology, it would do validation again because hackers or users, they could modify the HTML and post something and bypass that validation and send it over the server. So that's what I think of as pre and post. And I was trying to wrap my mind around your distinction between pre and post.
Right.
I think where you were getting at it is before they get into the field and after they leave the field. Is that right?
Exactly. Both are right. You have a post validation that happens at the server side, but you don't really have a lot of control over that, as a programmer. That's most of the time that's going to be some other applications checking that kind of stuff. Am I right about that, Darren? So you're right. There's going to have to be that kind of post validation too. but I'm talking about as you're entering your data. Yeah. And when your program is active, you might have post validation after your save button's been clicked. You might be doing some stuff in the back end of that to make sure too.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new heading down here. And I'm going to say ways to implement. And then one of them will be so pre and post. Am I thinking about this right? Am I sort of dissecting this? Yeah,
you are.
So we got required fields. So, if you're entering data, let's say for a person, well, first and last name is probably going to have to be required.
That's
If an email and a phone number is essential, perhaps those will be required as well. However, there are sometimes when you gotta think in the headspace of a user, they may have 2 or 3 pieces of information. Maybe they don't have everything, but instead of scribbling it down on a notepad or a post-it note until they have all the information, they just want to get it into the database. So at least there's a stub there of information that can go back later. So you got to keep that in mind. You don't want to make too many things required so they can't enter anything until they have everything sort of lined up and ready. So the format of data, perhaps we just say, hey, numbers only. Okay. Let me give examples.
So you just said, but the numbers only. There are some things like PowerApps takes care of some of that stuff for you, right? You can actually have, there's properties in there to make sure that you're putting only numbers in text input boxes. Sometimes if you're programming in a different language, though, you've got to worry about the key presses coming in, and you're the one that's going to have to verify if that's a number or a letter. So,
yeah. So on a text box, you can say, hey, numbers only. So I'm thinking of examples of pre-validation as you're describing it. We could say max characters.
Max characters.
Okay? So that's something else here would be a range of values. We would have range of characters.
Yep.
So we could say at least 2 characters. Let's see, for a last name, or let's think of something. Okay, how about this? For a United States state, well, we have these state abbreviations. For Florida, it's FL. In Illinois, it's IL.
Yeah.
So we could say at least 2 characters.
Yeah.
And at most, I'll say characters. Okay. So we could do some validation to say, hey, is it this much? Is it this much? What about business rules?
Yeah, right. That's, I was trying to come up with some good business rules and I couldn't come up with a good idea. And there's so many business rules.
So let's come up with an example of a business rule. One business rule that I have from my onboarding app is if it's the first time they log in, the first time they use the application, I'm going to send them over to the screen so they can input more information about themselves. So maybe we don't have their cell number, but they can enter it or update their profile photo. I wouldn't have that type of stuff. So it'd be best if they do that type of stuff. So I have a business rule that says, hey, if this condition is true, send them over to this screen to have them do something. Okay. Another example, just creating an edit form. If they leave out one piece of information or they say that they're a certain type of user or a manager, maybe we've got a pop-up that pops up if they answered something a certain way, and then we get more information about it. So that would be another, business rules. We come up with probably hundreds or thousands of different types of business rules, depending upon business processes. And yeah.
And when you talk about business rules, it's almost like that's a customized type of formatting, right? So you have what you just listed is a bunch of standard formats that we've got, and Nick had brought up email matching, social security numbers. But then like when you talk about business rules, that's actually it's actually mixing those standard types of validation along with the rules that are going to be defined within the meetings of your application development. So when you go into these meetings and say, I need to put this, the guy Snuffy Smith says, I need a program wrote, you're going in there, you're finding out where's the data, what's the data look like, but then you're going to say, okay, what are the business rules? What are the rules that you got? What is the action of this program? What are we going to do? If I enter an amount of money in here, is it going to not just go into a total table, but it's also maybe going to go into a category table or a product table? We're going to have to know. We're going to have to know what that business needs specifically to do with that data, right? And those are the business rules, and those are going to get defined in the moment. And they're usually going to be a combination of the things that you just listed up there, Darren. You know, the standard stuff.
Yeah.
But so much more.
Yeah. So Emmer asked a question. So do we use a global variable for that if they're the first time user? And yes. And I determine that in the app on start. So far in the onboarding application, I do use a global. I try to use local variables everywhere that I can. But in this case, in app on start, you can't use locals, and you might actually need to know that on some other screen. So I used a global for that.
Yep.
Yeah. So
and actually, that's good stuff, because I actually talked about that in our lab too. There's 2 points. There's 2 times when you need to use the global, right? And that's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see Amber's comment in the chat, Kurt? So Amber says, I've been learning variables from lab 2. Excited to know that I am understanding.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff.
Very cool. Okay. Well, guys, is there anything else that we should define here? And maybe if we jump over to PowerApps, start creating some edit screens, perhaps we might come back and add to this. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just that's a good overview of data validation that we just did. We covered about 2 hours worth of validation talk within about 20 minutes there. So
yeah. So guys, I'm going to share, if you guys like to see my notes that I create for all kinds of stuff as I work on videos or in live streams, I'm going to include the link down there. It's powerplatformlinks.com. I created it for you. So just wanted to make you aware of that. And so here we go. Now, using my application template, I have I have all kinds of different screens. I have a screen for a blank screen. It's got my menu and everything. Within PowerApps, you should always try to reuse something you've had in the past to sort of get a jump start on some screen that you're trying to develop. So I know I do have an edit screen somewhere in here. So we have a listing screen. We've worked on that before. Okay, so here we've got a new screen, and this could be used as, an edit. Okay. If you have a lot of values, or you have a lot of values to edit, let me move this around here so you guys can see the whole thing. So in this particular situation, we only have 3 fields here, but we might have a lot of fields, to enter. So in that case, what I recommend, instead of setting up a screen like this, is to have a listing screen. And then when they click on our record, they go to an edit screen with all of the details there. And if you have a lot of fields, generally I'll go with some type of a tab screen like this. Okay. So I think what I may do here is work on some, probably a good place to start off with your edit screens would be your application administration portion of your application. Would you agree with that, Kurt?
absolutely.
There's all kinds of little edit screens that you need for drop-down lists and setting up the data for the application. So typically what I do for my application administration dashboard, dare I say dashboard? Kurt loves the word dashboard. He creates dashboards in his sleep, I tell you.
Everybody wants a dashboard. That's fun. It's funny. A lot of customers, I want a dashboard. Well, what is a dashboard? Well, I don't know, but I want it. I want a dashboard.
Well, it makes you, if you're working on a dashboard type of screen, you feel in control. You feel like you're in the know. You're giving all the key performance indicators, the KPIs, and the ATLs and the MFCs.
Oh my
it's very
goodness.
important.
Wow, that sounds important. Yeah. and that is important too, but a lot of people just don't even know what you just said.
I can see people right now Googling MFC ATL. Okay, so A lot of times, I just keep things simple for an application administration screen, and I'll put some buttons on here to allow them to get around in an app admin capacity. Okay, so going back over to our database, what data do we currently have? Excuse me. Well, we definitely have some user data. Okay, and we definitely have data in these 4 tables up here. Okay, so this application is where we're setting this up and designing it in a way that could be used as a service, or that I could sell this one application with a single database. A single database, guys, have multiple customers. It would span many tenants, many environments, many users, and be able to match these things up and associate them properly. So people are only looking at their data, the data they should be seeing, or the data they should be editing. So that's a special little caveat that actually makes this program a little complex,
And more important about validation, right? You don't want the wrong tenant looking at the wrong information.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
Geez, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble with that these days. But also, when I'm looking at this, it seems like now we haven't really talked about the word CRUD. And no, I'm not cussing. It's a 4-letter word, but I'm not cussing. But it's a type of screen. We haven't talked about that yet, and I'm sure you're going to. But I almost think that every one of these data tables that you got, as I'm just looking at it, and that's what I do when I'm looking at data, is I look at it for the first time. I say, okay, I need a CRUD screen for virtually everything you got up there.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell us what CRUD is?
Let's see. Do you know what it is, Jeff?
Do not remember.
Okay, that was a test. You failed. No, I'm teasing. You did. I can't remember half the time. So it's create, right? Create, read, update, and delete. So you got to read a record and write a record. That's create and read. And then you got to be able to update. That's writing a record. And of course, you should be able to delete one too. But you know what? I usually let the users delete it because they do it automatically by accident anyway, right? They delete records. So I let the users delete stuff.
Now, Jeff, did I spell that right? Acronym?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right.
Yeah, it's good.
Shoo.
All right, so we've got huh?
Darren was sweating there for a second. He goes, "Oh, I hope I spelled that right."
It's like as you grow up and back in my day, you would do math in your head or on paper, and they started bringing calculators, and the more you rely on technology, the less in touch you have with being able to do something with your brain. So there's a lot of words I've sort of forgotten how to spell, because if I do misspell it, typically Word or something will tell me, Yeah. So, anyway. Okay, so I think the heart of this application, one of the things is probably essential to any application, is users. How do we manage users? Because it's really important, because we need to be able to assign them or associate them to a tenant, to an organization, and such. Okay, so I think maybe starting off with users and having all these fields here that we can edit, that might be a good thing for us to do here. All right, so, and let me see. Let me do my screens just in case. Now this is our home screen, almost like a dashboard, right? So when somebody logs in, they'll see this type of stuff, and they can update their user profile, or actually go to a different. So this might be the dashboard, But what I'm looking for is anything that manages users. When I work on a project that spans, weeks or months, sometimes I got to refresh because I work on a lot of projects, So it doesn't look like I have any type of user admin screen. And in fact, I might actually want to make this a part of the developer, Because if you think about this, if I set up this application to be run in somebody else's organization, well, the owner of that organization or the manager in that organization, I might want to set them up to manage people in their own organization. But as the developer of this app, I need to be able to manage things like tenants and organizations and be able to associate these things together. So in order to find any controls here within my Jumpstart kit, I am going to go down to a screen I call copy controls from here. I'm going to find a button that I like, and I'm going to copy it. And then I will go back to this screen here. And keeping an eye on comments. Let's see what we have here. When using SharePoint, you have to share the related list with all users. So how can you avoid users from accessing all the data being? That's why SharePoint isn't the best data source, in my opinion. There are a few things you can do to sort of lock down the SharePoint list to make it more difficult for them to go directly to the data source. Yeah, but that's sort of like the price that you pay in a way for not having that premium licensing and using something like Dataverse or SQL Server. So also, Patty says here, I create unique permission groups for my lists and libraries and put users in those groups who need access. Yeah. Typically, when I create a SharePoint type of data source for my app, I create a brand new SharePoint site, and I make all the users members of that SharePoint site, and I do not send them any links. I do not send them any email from that SharePoint site. Okay. Now they're members, so somehow they might do some type of a report or go somewhere within SharePoint to see all the sites they have membership to. Okay, so that's one way they could get around it. Okay, but I'd say 99% of the users aren't going to do that, unless they have a reason. Don't use a SharePoint site where there's already data where it's being used for some other purpose. And then they'll do all of their editing inside your app, and more than likely they'll just never know about that SharePoint list. Okay, just sort of sharing my my experience, my thoughts on using SharePoint as a data source there. Okay, now what I'm going to do, this is the beginning of an app admin screen. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these two things. I'm going to go down to the developer screen here. I'm going to paste it here. And the first thing that I want to be able to do is probably manage users. Okay, so we're managing users at the highest level.
Just real quick, Darren, as you're doing this, I just want to point out, a lot of you guys might be seeing him. He's got all these different screens set up over here, and he's dragging stuff over here, and he's going to a certain screen with us. He's using a template. And this template, he spent a lot of time working on to develop, and it's something that's really important that I think if you guys don't develop your own, maybe get one, because that's going to help. In fact, maybe even get this one, because it's going to make your programming time so much faster. You see what he's doing. He says, well, I need to create this screen. So he jumps over here. He's got a screen that looks somewhat like what he's getting ready to use. Boom, he's got a template for that, and he just dumps that in there, and that's a starting point. So that's why he's going really fast. He's throwing buttons up there. He's throwing stuff up there. It's taking him no time to do that because he spent a little bit of time to work on this in the front end. I just wanted to put that in there, Darren, before you get going. So, because some of these guys might be going, well, where are you getting all this stuff from? So,
yeah, so I'll share the link to this this screen here where you can learn more about my Jumpstart kit. And what I was going to say, some people, it's like, well, I don't want to, you're just here to sell your stuff. Well, I do set up this whole playlist on my channel to show you exactly how to do it yourself if you don't want to. But if you want to save time, you can buy mine, or you can build it, yourself. Yeah. So yeah, appreciate that, Kurt. Yeah, I want people to understand what is that I'm starting from. If I started everything from scratch, I'd never get any apps built with you guys. We would just be covering, oh, now we need a menu. Okay, how do we build a menu now? We can get anywhere. And it's sort of like if you're in the business of cranking out PowerApps apps, like, oh my goodness, reinventing the wheel over and over again. Start with a template. Start with a starting point. And Michelle says, it's so awesome. When I first learned it helped me so much. Well, thanks for sharing that, Michelle. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a little edit screen for all the users in the system. Okay, now I'm going to, I think I'm going to go with a listing screen, something like this. I really like what we've set up here. Now, if you remember, this was a few weeks ago where you can sort on a column. You click on it again, and it will reverse the ascend descending. I'd like to sort of finish this up in the next few minutes, and then make a copy of it. I don't want to make a copy of it until it's nice and sort of have more of a polished feature to it. Okay, so what we have here inside, we have the single icon here that tells us if it's ascending or descending, but it should be on top of this column telling us which one it is. Okay, so if I hop into this X, you'll see all this such stuff. Okay, so if it's user, we got org name and tenant name, and over here we have username. So I'm going to copy that. Kurt, you want to say a little spiel about a switch and doing branching in PowerApps? I'm sure you cover some of that stuff in your new lab videos.
Well, I'm just, kind of trying to think. I wish I had a moment to think about it, but
Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, I need more than a moment to think about it.
Right.
So,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. So what I'm going to do here then is we have icon heading org. What exactly is, so we've got these different icons here that cover up the headings here. Okay, so we probably should have one over on top of environment. Okay, let me find this one. Okay, and then I am going to copy and paste that, and then header user. Okay, this one we're going to say label heading environment for this guy. And then the width. Click on width. There we go. There we go. That's the X. That's the width. Okay. And in fact, on this icon, I'm going to say ICO environment heading. Okay. And then and for that icon, where did that icon go? It's the one I need right there. Yeah, so sometimes it's hard to get at controls if you have things dynamically moving or sizing and things are on top of it. Sometimes you need things on top, but it also makes it difficult to find.
Yeah,
So
last week you spent a little bit of time talking about why you had that icon on top of there. And but so if you guys want to go look at last week's stuff, he spent a little bit of time talking about that.
Yeah, so this is going to be important that we have this down because eventually this will have probably hundreds or thousands of users in here, and we'll be able to sort, and we'll probably also need to build in a filter and search and all that type of stuff. So
yep.
It's good that we get this one right, and then we can copy from here. There it is. It's icon 3. Okay, so I failed by not naming my icons to make it a little easier to find. Okay.
Points off. Points off.
Points off. Yeah, if I was in Kurt's class, he would take out a red marker and say, points off, you did this wrong. And it might be like 10 or 20%. I mean, it hurts. When he gives you points off, it hurts.
You're down to a B+.
Right. You know, there was a reason why 80%, if you got 80% in any of my classes, you got an A. There's a reason why. Somebody said, well, his classes are so easy. All you got to do is get an 80% and you get an A. You got to ask yourself, well, why, you know, how hard is it to get 80%?
Yeah. All right. So we've got this icon, which I'll probably need for later. And then for this arrow, we've got a switch statement here. Now, Kurt, are you now ready to speak about switch?
Well, in terms of what do you want me to know? What do you want me to talk about with it?
That's all right.
Okay.
So let's run this. And yeah, we got a few things that aren't set right here. So now on the click event, these icons, now we added an icon on top of each heading in order to turn this into you know, a hand you could click on, you know.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So for this heading, if we go look at the color here, we check to see, well, we need to make sure this is environment. Okay. So I go into environment name. That's going to be it right there. And we also learned that we need to have spaces in our column names. That's why I don't like spaces and column names at all. We'll have to deal with weird stuff like this if you look at this switch statement.
Yeah, you were asking me about that switch statement, and I'm thinking, well, you don't want me to start talking about that because I could go down some roads with that. I didn't know what direction to go down because
well, I'm doing some repetitive things that I've already gone over, and something that you've said in the past, Kurt, that I really agree with is you don't care if it's a beginner level topic or an intermediate topic, and we've already covered it before. It's probably good to sort of touch on that again, because sometimes it takes repetition to sort of sink down in your brain, and especially using it or seeing it in action really helps.
Yeah.
So a switch statement is a way of doing branching, right? Just like an if statement.
Mm-hmm.
And almost any type of branching will be done with a Boolean value, right? And then based on that Boolean value, now Boolean value is true, false, yes, no type of thing. And based on those Boolean values, you're going to either take some action or you're going to give some value. So in this case, we have this little icon here that's going to be moving around based on values here. So in a switch statement, it's going to evaluate this local variable. Okay, in this case, it says that we've clicked on username. And what this is going to do is going to match it up until it finds username. So we got org name, tenant name, environment name. And when it matches it up, then it's going to return these values here.
Right. Now, I guess where I was going to go when you were talking about that is I almost always wrap my switch statements around an if or inside of an if condition to make sure that you notice that he's got a list of values that he's going down to that switch statement with. It's going to equal this. Nope. Does equal this. Nope. Does equal this. Yep. You see that where he's got a list of values he's going down. So what my big deal is when I'm talking to you guys is that you're always going to be in control of your program. Always, 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 always. So you're never going to luck into things. So what happens if it's not one of those things? Well, he's already got it set up. In this case, he doesn't need to do the if, because he's got a very finite condition that's going in here. You're going to select one of those columns. So you're not going to get into that if or that switch statement unless you select one of those columns. And each one of those columns is a condition in that switch statement. But if you were doing a switch statement that said you were checking like letters typed off of a keyboard, right? Maybe you were doing letter grades for students and you wanted to go A through F. Well, what happens what happens if it's E? You don't want to have it otherwise. You know, in a switch statement, you have this an else, right?
That's
and
right.
I believe that if you need an else in a switch statement, that you don't have control over your program. I don't believe in else's in switch statements. My else is going to be in the if. I'm going to have an if condition wrapped around there and say, if it's a range, if my letter range is between A and F, then I'm going to go into the switch to figure out which one it is. But I'm not going to go in there if it's not an F, an A through an F, if it's not in that range. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, especially if you have a switch select. You have these different cases that you're trying to match, right, in a switch statement.
Yeah.
And let's say you've got a lot of code in there. You got like 1,000 lines of code, and you might have like a few hundred of different switch. And then if it doesn't match into any of those, it goes down to an else. Well, how many computations did it happen until it got to the else?
Yep. And then you could have just one check. Oh, it's not in that. So go on. So go on to the next thing. You know, you're right. And you don't have control, but it makes you don't have control of your program. You're lucking into things. You're lucking into that the user is going to press the right key. How many of you guys want to stake your lives on that? You know, if you were staking your life on the user pressing the right key, well, you know, you want to make sure that you don't do that. Have control of your program. You don't have control over anything else in life, but you got control over that. So
good. And that's exactly what he taught me when I worked with him.
And if I saw a switch statement that didn't have an if wrapped around it, now in this case, he's got it already set up. So he's got an implied if condition wrapped around that. But if he did that, it would have been major points off. Yep. On any lab that did that. Because you didn't have control of your program. It's a perfect example of having control of your program. Yep.
You see what Nick says about Kurt?
What's Nick say?
Up on the screen there, you see it? Like that.
Yeah.
Kurt paid like that. Kurt paid big money for this stuff. Yeah. Pay attention, guys, because people pay big money for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
and Darren's been paying for it for all his life.
Yeah. Hey, Joseph, I didn't get to watch from the start, but I love watching these streams. Thank you for doing these. Well, you're welcome. Thanks for the kind words. I'll reveal a trick here. So we're only a few minutes into this, right? So Joseph, you could bring the little cursor of the live stream all the way to the beginning, hit play, and then if you can stand it, play us at 1.5 speed, and eventually you'll catch up to us if you want to watch it from the beginning.
That scares me, man, thinking about watching me at 1.5 speed.
Yeah. And also keep in mind, guys, if this is something that you want to do in your own screens, I've got little labels up here to sort of help me debug and know what's going on here. So which one of these is being sorted? You know, which column name was clicked on? Oh, I put that up there because I have a local variable that holds that. Okay, now it looks like I'm not setting it for environment. Okay, so I need to make sure that is set up right.
Again, this is a professional tactic right here. You spend a little bit more time in the front end of this thing setting up these little debugs. And, you know, you might be in here wanting to just go ahead and let me just draw the screen. I'm just going to go draw the screen, and you willy-nilly it and you get it done. But then if you spend a little bit more time on the front end of this thing, look at how organized he is within this now, where he can actually see what he's clicking on and what the values are. And it doesn't cost a lot, just a few more minutes, you know.
I like it. Now I'm not seeing the sorting actually doing anything. So when you're trying to debug any type of sorting, what you want to do is click on the data source here for the gallery, and let's open this up and look at it. Okay. So it's going to take this little sort column, and it says environment name. Okay. Darren Neese's environment. And based on this, it says it's true. True means ascending, false is descending. So we're going to sort on this. Okay. Environment name true. I click on it again, it's false. And that should be environment name. That should be sorting on that. Okay. So let's also implement that over here for the application. Now I need a copy of this little icon here. So we'll rename this ICO app heading. Okay. And then we have this thing called app name. Okay, so if I click on this guy, move this guy up. App heading, okay. I need the name of this one though. And then for the X property, okay, so it moves it over. Make sure the heading is the same here. Okay. And then for this arrow, going back to the switch statement, right? Need something like this. Copy, paste, and this is going to be called app name. And then we need the app heading icon here. So I'm here and click, get that. There. We'll run it. And something isn't quite right. So let's find out what's going on here. So if we find out that this thing is, okay, that's environment. If I click over here, it still says environment. So we need to make sure when this thing's clicked on in the on select is that we're changing this to app name. App name. And we need to be changing. So the only way that we know exactly what we need to change is whenever you make these slight changes, especially when you're copying and pasting, you need to go through and test each individual thing. So if you don't test it, your users will find your bugs. And if they catch too many of them, they might be like, well, can you, they'll start asking, hey, can we have something in place so this doesn't happen, these bugs? And you're like, I always try my hardest to test as much as possible. People get bent out of shape on bugs. I mean, yeah, it's frustrating, but realize bugs is a part of software development,
Well, and you talked about this before, where you talk about calculators made it easier for you not to do math, right? So and in life, I'm always forgetting to carry the one now. So I want to just say, make sure, just don't assume that, yeah, it's in 5 different places right there. I've got it in 4 places. I changed it. I know that the 5th's going to be okay, and just move on. Guaranteed that 5th spot is where you messed up at. That 5th, that one spot that you didn't check. So make sure you go through and check every little nook and cranny, And if you can, try to do it from different patterns than the one that you always try to use. Like try to go in it from the exact opposite direction that you normally go through, because that'll help you find things too.
Absolutely.
And, one more thing. Every bug you find is 2 o'clock in the morning phone call you're not going to get when your program doesn't work. Because in my case, a lot of my programs, I did stuff for the military. And so somebody over there in Korea would be having a problem with my program, and I'd be at 2 o'clock in the morning going, oh, what? So, yeah. So
if you guys caught that, well, people pay big money for that right there. or you have to learn that by going, your rite of passage and becoming seasoned and realizing these things on your own. It's easier, I guess a wise person will learn from their own mistakes, but an even more wiser person will learn from other people's mistakes. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, Darren, because I try to learn from other people's mistakes, because you know what? You may not live to learn from all your mistakes. So yeah. you might make a mistake that this cost you your life. So try to learn from somebody else's mistakes.
Yeah. Right. So what I'm going to do is, I think I've got it to a point where I like it. It seems like it's functioning properly. And I'm going to now duplicate this screen. Okay. And start working on this separately now.
So you just touched on the most important programming pattern there is. In programming, it's all about problem solving. So you learn how to solve a problem one time. That's what he just did. He learned how to solve a problem one time. And then the next step is learn how to repeat that solution. So that's what he's doing now. So now that he's got it fixed one time, now he can move that and repeat it in other places now. There you go.
Absolutely. So now I have the name of this screen. I'm going to go over to the developer screen, say users, like image user here. And what I'm going to do is navigate that screen. Screen transition. What if they have a random one in here? Kurt, you sort of got me to like the cover.
Yeah.
I sort of like that flying in from the side. Maybe I'm just.
And then when you go the other direction, it'll uncover it the same way it came out. Isn't that cool?
I like that. That is cool.
That's smooth.
All right. So dev user management screen. So this should show all the users. Now, if I set up something for app admins, it should all be users in their organization, right? That's going to be the big determining factor, that the users within their org. So, and what's good about this dev level of admin screen is we can create users. Our users are automatically created by coming into the application if it was shared with them. And then from here, we can assign them to organizations, environments, tenants, and apps. Okay. So what I want to see here, this may not be a bad data source to look at. Okay, because this is a view that we created over in SQL Server. Okay, and so these are all the users, and then it's showing me what they're a part of. I'm going to test this out a little bit, make sure it still works. Now, if you use globals to keep track of what column was clicked on, then it might get mixed up with that other screen, right? Okay. So let's add a new edit screen. And we should probably even add a little button on here. Let's go over to copy controls from here. And let's say if we wanted to add a new user, a little button up here. Add a new user. Okay. Now the edit screen, I think we have just this new screen. Now we might end up having a lot of fields. So I'm trying to make up my mind. Let's go back to the ERD diagram and sort of look at all the different fields that we'll be working with here. So we got quite a few fields, but it's not like a ton. If we had, I don't know, 50 to 100 different columns, you might want to start off with a tabbed screen. I think we'd probably be able to fit all this on one screen, no problem. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick with this and probably rip out this gallery and make this edit thing here bigger. So I'm going to duplicate this screen. Okay. And then for this, I'm going to prefix it with dev user edit screen. Okay, so now we have that. So I'm going to copy that screen name, and I'm going to move this one down. When they click on add new user, say navigate. And I'm going to pass a little parameter as a local variable. You ready for this? Call it loc new record, and we're going to say true. So that other screen is going to know if it's a new or an existing record that we're going to be editing. So click on that, make sure it actually works. Okay, it goes over here. That's good. And then what I'll do is I think I'm going to rip this out. Try to select all these controls that are together here. And sometimes when you do that, it might select things like your spinner. Make sure you don't have that selected because we're just going to hit delete here. Here we go. Now, of course, we have errors as it was depending upon that gallery for some things.
Measles. We have the measles.
Yeah. You see a bunch of red dots all over your app. Your app has measles.
Needs to be vaccinated.
Yeah. All right. I'm just gonna take that out for now. It has nothing to do with this screen that we're working with.
So just I don't want to get off too far of what you're trying to do here because we want to try to make some kind of ground on what you're trying to get accomplished. Yeah. But yes, last week we talked about user interfaces, and I thought it might be a good point to bring up. And I'm not picking at you and by any means on this, but it's a great point. Oh. No, I'm not. No. Don't you get offended. Don't you dare get offended. Okay, so we had a button up there that said add new user, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so is there anything else that we're going to add on the screen besides user stuff? And that's the question.
We might have some filtering at the top, to be honest. I might want to filter based on organization or tenant.
Yeah. So, and that's the question is when you see something like add new user, you become verbose when within your buttons and all that. So what I'd like to do is you would just put new up there. And because your whole screen is about adding a new user or creating users or working with users, so you would just put new for the user. Now, if you're doing something outside of just nothing but the user, then maybe you want to make sure you're saying add new user or add new tenant or add new application. You might need to do something like that. It was just a good point, I thought, for user interface development, not to be too wordy within your stuff.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And some people just create, you can create a little icon, a little plus icon.
Yep.
Which a lot of times is used to denote new something.
Yep. Which is what you do over here on your menus on the left, right? Your menus on the left are just icons. Well, unless you do that, unless you hit the hamburger, right? And that's generally enough, Yeah.
Yeah. Excuse me. All right, so what I did was I sort of expanded this a little bit, okay? And I'm going to get a good listing over here. I've got my ERD diagram. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this list up here on another screen so I can easily reference it as I work on this screen. So I have a feeling we're going to need some drop-down lists here. So I'm going to go down to copy controls from here, grab me a drop-down list, and perhaps anything else that we might need. Okay, so we need a tenant. That should be a drop-down. First, middle, last name, that's going to be text box, M365 email, text, communication preference. Might be use a drop-down for that. And okay, then we've got an image for them. So I don't have an image styled here. It's not really needed to be styled. The image itself is, I guess, the style. And we might need a toggle to say, hey, I want this user to be active or not. Okay. So then I'm going to go back over to this edit screen. I'm going to paste these guys in here.
So what he did was he had this screen over it. He had all his controls set up, and of course they're all set up with the colors and everything the way he wants it, so he doesn't have to remake that anytime. Now he's basically saying, I'm hungry, it's a late night snack. I'm going to go over here to copy controls. I'm going to go into the fridge and I'm going to get what I want to eat, and I'm going to go and cut. And he control sees that, selects them, control sees it, and puts it over there on the screen. Now it's time to eat. Yeah,
that was good.
I love
Back
it.
at Picasso.
Yeah, I never thought of doing that. I think I said this last week too, but I get excited every time I see you go over here to copy controls from here. I'm like, what a time saver that is. That's like the first thing I need to do whenever I start a project is make sure I have my copy controls from here screen set up. Now, of course, if you get your template, shameless plug. If you get your template, you've already got that done, right? But even if you don't do a template, do that.
Yeah. Thinking about how I want to structure this, Kurt. So I think maybe like I got users associated with a tenant. I think they might need to be associated. Like I could be associated as a user, associated with many tenants,
Absolutely.
So we might have like a mapping table in the middle.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Because you could have a tenant's got many users, a user's got many tenants.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
That's
it might get a little complicated. So here's a one-to-many relationship here.
Yeah.
So now that I'm considering things a little more, I think we need a more flexible way of associating a user. And what I'm thinking of is if this is a software as a service, and I saw this, typically they're just going to be a part of one tenant, but they might have several tenants like I do, And in that case, I want it to span.
If you have more than one interest, let's say I've got a company that's got like different types of interests, and I'm really excited about using your program for the software as a service for this one interest that I've got. But maybe I open a car wash over there and I want to try to track all that kind of stuff over there. Well, I want another tenant. I want to use your system again. So what have I got to do? I've got to create another user to do that. Yeah,
it would be awful because if you think about it, it's like, oh, the system doesn't allow that. Have you ever heard that before? The system, Jeff, have you ever heard that? I'm sure you've worked with software systems in the past. It's like, well, the customers, can you just put a discount on my account? And like next time I place an order, you guys give me the system doesn't have a place for me to put that discount in here. Well, sure, it should be able to handle, it should be flexible to handle all kinds of different situations, right?
I've got a quick story. Oh, Lord.
Let's go for it, Kurt. Let's hear it. Your stories are really good.
Okay, this is crazy. This is a true story. So I buy this workout bench, real expensive workout bench, and it was late coming. So I wanted to cancel. I canceled it, and I ordered again because it said it might be lost in the shipment. So I ordered it again, and guess what? I saw it. It was $100 cheaper. So I said, well, I want to cancel that. Well, then they let me cancel. Well, then it came in, and I said, you guys, I work 7 days a week. You guys aren't going to come here to pick this thing up. I've got to return it. You said it was lost in shipment, so I canceled it. Now it came. They said, we don't have that option here to be able to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and give that to you for free. Because they didn't have an option. You gave me these two crazy expensive workout benches. It was crazy. And I bought it for the discounted price. So it's amazing.
That's interesting.
Just because they didn't have the option.
Yeah.
They lost money on that deal, didn't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did. And so what you just said right there was really important right there. You do not want that. You don't want that problem. You got to be flexible.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so I moved these tables around a little bit. in order to allow for some mapping tables. So let me, I'm just going to unpack what I'm thinking, and Kurt, or even Jeff or anybody, I want to open this up almost like not really a debate, but some critical thinking here. Okay. I'm thinking about putting a mapping table between all of these.
Have to be done. Has to be.
Okay. I'm just making sure I'm not.
That's my thought.
Sometimes, and you'll get into this issue with developers that aren't seasoned. Well, they will over-engineer the crap out of their app, their database, everything. Something that's supposed to be simple, it just blows up to this 30 or 50 table, and really they only needed like 5 tables, but because they've sort of overdone or over-designed it to a point where it's a little bit of a hot mess. So there's a fine line. Yeah.
Think about this, Darren, and go ahead and finish your thought, because I think you're right.
I was just saying, you got to find a good balance, and you get that sense of balance the more apps you write. Okay,
I agree. However, when you look at this ERD, can you have multiple organizations? Can a tenant have more than one organization? Yep. Can an organization have more than one tenant? Yep. When you can answer those questions like that means some many to many. Now, yeah, it might be complicated because you've got a mapping table in for each one of those. However, your program is going to run so much faster, and you're going to be less complicated. Think how complicated it would have to be to go out there and create another organization just to be able to have another tenant. Come on, man. So it's going to make it so much easier this way. That's my debate. Now I'm going to get out. Now, some of you guys might have some different points of view, and I'd like to hear them if you guys do.
Yeah. So anybody that prides themselves in database design, live streaming, you're welcome to chime in. And I'm doing it, and so that's an open invitation as I'm building this, because you're going to see exactly what I'm thinking. Me as a user, Darren Neese, well, I'm the developer of the whole application. I want to be able to be associated with any organization. Okay, any tenant. Now what I could do is in the users table say is developer, and then if you are a developer, then you can access everything. Well, we're going to have to manage what users can access what thing, So
yeah, there's a huge liability implied here when you don't. A huge liability. The insurance would never cover.
Okay.
If you have users seeing information that they're not supposed to be seeing on other users, think about that.
Oh yeah.
That's the liability I'm thinking about here. You got to make sure that this is right.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of, typically I don't create tables this way. I usually go in and create it another way where I've got more options here. Let me hit F4. That will bring up my property screen here, which is standard in all the Microsoft Visual Studio type of environments, right? If you have an F4, if you have a standard keyboard.
I have to get a better keyboard. Thanks, Darren.
That's why I said it the way I did.
I have a keyboard that it tries to do too much, and it won't be a keyboard. It's like, can you just be a keyboard? It's trying to make my coffee for me in the morning, just be a keyboard. It's kind of like the phones these days. They do everything but be a phone sometimes, right? Never noticed that? Can you just be a phone?
Okay, so I'm going to hit save here. It should create the table. And then what I'm going to do, I just want to design it. I'm going to go over to the Object Explorer. I'm going to pin that. I don't want to look at that anymore. And I'm going to go find this user organization. So this is going to be a mapping table in between these two tables. User organization. I'm going to say design. Okay. And I want to make sure that this is the key. Okay. This is an identity. And then we're going to say user ID, integer, and also say organization ID. Okay. Kurt, is there anything else that we should have in this mapping table, you think?
I'm sure there is. I'm trying to think of it as you're writing it, because it's always good to try to do it when you're creating it.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about having these mapping tables, now there's a rule about mapping tables. You only include in the mapping table things that are pertinent to both of those things in the moment. Now I know I just said a lot there, so let me try to give you a good example of that. For instance, I think Nick was working on one, throwing your name out there, Nick. Nick was working on something where he was dealing with tenants, and he was dealing with buildings, addresses, and tenants. And then, so in that tenant and that address, he would put in the mapping table, he put in like the date of that deal, the date of that contract or whatever it is. And I know I'm chopping that up, Nick, a little bit. Okay, he says many to many is always worth a bit. Okay, so that's he's got to catch up there. But anyway, so you put in you would put in the date of that contract. You see what I'm saying? So it's dealing with that tenant and that thing. So when you're dealing with your table right there, your mapping table, if we can go back to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Give me one
what
second.
information? Okay, go ahead.
Throw these things.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to go to the ERD?
Yeah, go back to where you were at, and you had asked the question, is there anything else that you need to put in there?
Mm-hmm.
So if we could go back to that. So what we need to do is we need to ask ourselves what information is going to be pertinent to those two things that you're mapping, right?
Yeah.
In that moment, just in that moment.
Yeah. So I have a model table that's got all the fields that I almost want in every single database table that I have. Okay.
Kind of like Dataverse does.
Yeah. But you said date. I'm like, yep. I want to know when it was created. I want to know when it was last modified. Who was the person that did those things? We could have an association between a user and an organization. And let's say there were a lot of records that were associated with that user record, but that user was either fired or they resigned. Well, we need to make them inactive, but still keep the record there so we have the historical data.
That's right.
So this should be everything. I don't know that we really need notes here.
No.
I think that might be a little too much. So we just take that out. But everything else here, I know it's really small, guys, and this interface right here does not allow me to zoom in. Otherwise, I would make it larger for you.
And there might be some more statistical information that you want to gather between the two, the relationship. You know, like maybe for how long you've had that they've been there, or how many times they've renewed, or whatever. But you know, you can always glean that other ways as well. I'm just thinking for reporting purposes, it might be good. Sometimes I like to put unnormalized data in the mapping table so that way I've got that if I'm writing a report. Yeah. And you can, as you're writing your program, you can actually add to that. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna make some more space here. Maybe pull these guys up a little bit. And the mapping tables in between. So as we work on this app, guys, we might end up having close to 100 different database tables. So one of the things that people search for on YouTube and the web is they want to see an advanced example. Guys, this is going to be an advanced example of a PowerApps application.
And then those same people are going to complain because can't they just break it down and make it easy?
All right, then we'll do a Hello World application.
Yep. People are never happy, are they? We're just not.
I think it's a human tendency, you know.
It is.
All right, so we're gonna have a friendly relationship there. What's that?
Feeble, fickle people. That's what we are. Except for you, Darren. Except for you.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna want one for each of these, you know.
I think so.
So we got a little bit of work here. So I'm gonna select everything that we had in this one. Okay. And I don't need the model. Well, not at the moment. I don't need it. I'm gonna create a new table. And let me see if I can bring this over on a different screen. And I can. That's great. All right. I'll click here, hit paste. We've got all of our fields. Now this one is going to be called, let's save, and we're going to call this user. Yeah, in some cases, I was gonna direct this to you, Kurt. Sometimes he'll put actually the word map or mapping. He always calls it a mapping table when you have a many relationship. Um, I don't do that. I just try to use the two words from the two different tables and put them together. And for me, that makes sense. You know. Um, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to make sure that I have this as a key. I need to make sure that it is an identity type of field. Okay. So we'll save that. And I'll bring the ERD diagram down and we will add that table. Index was out of bounds of the array. Okay, well, let's try it again. Doesn't like that. That's interesting. Now I wonder, in these cases, when I've got a problem with Visual Studio or SSMS, you get some weird error. A lot of times I'll just exit out and bring it back. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do here.
It's almost like a small reboot, huh?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've had to do that with the PowerApps. A lot of times you guys have seen me do that. I wonder if I could go into tables and just drag the table over. That would be a sort of a neat little trick if it allows me to do that. So if I said user tenant, I just dragged it over here. Look at that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we got that. And then, okay, we got user ID, which I'll make that over there. Okay, user's ID and then user ID. Very good. Instead of org ID, this should be tenant ID. Up there. And I'll hit save all. Okay, looks like we're good there. Now, this sort of makes me feel this relationship is a little redundant, and perhaps we don't want that in there anymore. So I might actually take out that relationship. Okay. Now, that might have a consequence of the query that we've already created, but we're going to rewrite that query anyway because we're creating relationships. We're going to have to do a lot more joining in that view. So I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to say delete relationship from database. I think I might actually keep it for now and then remove it later once we have the other tables in the query. Okay.
I'm sorry, Darren. What was redundant? What were you saying was redundant?
You see, I've got a relationship between users and tenant from before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's redundant. So I plan on deleting that, removing that, but that would cause our view not to work and all kinds of stuff. So eventually we're going to remove that relationship there.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to make sure your design is nice and clean. If you've got a bunch of stuff out there that was from something before and it's not that way anymore, eventually you need to clean that type of stuff up. Keep your application really nice and tidy because, over time, applications get more and more complex. And I remember when I worked with you, Kurt, you would call them, you've got a hairy situation there, or a Gordian knot. We need, so if you don't keep things nice and tidy in your design, in your code, in your documentation, whatever, when things get hard, it's almost going to be too hard, but if you keep things as simple as you can, clean as you can. When it gets into those hard times where you're trying to debug something, you can't get to the bottom of it, you'll be able to fix those problems easier.
Right. Just like any other process, the least amount of moving pieces is better, right?
Yeah.
The least amount of moving pieces.
So I'm going to go find my model table again. I'm going to actually just use this one here. Let's go into that user tenant. Let's design that. So I've got ID all the way down. Okay. And a new one, and this one will be user environment.
This must be Saturday. You know why this? I know this is Saturday, Darren.
Why is that?
Because I'm doing what I love. This is just, you know.
I almost feel like in your video.
True.
I don't know. When we created that video, it was a part of something else. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I think I might keep this for later,
Yeah. I love programming. You guys may not know that, but I also love to teach programming. I love everything about teaching people how to program. I really enjoy those moments when people get it. You can see the light bulb go off in their head. I like presenting information in a way, and again, it's a challenge, right? I like to present information in a way that doesn't give the answer to people, but gives them enough of the answer to where they can go and they can grapple at it and work at it and figure it out, and then that light bulb kicks off. To me, that's what teaching's about. And I like taking a person who's feeling overwhelmed about a subject and breaking it down and making it easy for them to understand. I say this often, but contrary to what other people believe when they think about programming or computer science, software development, any of those kinds of things, we're not born with this knowledge. So when people think that somebody's really smart at something, and they may be, it's not because they were born with that way. They worked at it and they had to learn how to do it. And I guess I don't think that I'm very smart in anything. And I feel like I know how to program pretty good. So I believe that if I can do it, then surely all of you guys can do it that are trying to do this. But the difference in when a person can get it and when they can't, I believe is in the teaching. I believe it's how it's being taught, that somehow or another there's a disconnect and a person can't get it and they're not understanding. So the big challenge that I love about programming and teaching people how to program is how to meet somebody at their map of the world. Find out where they're at, meet them at their map of the world, and bring them into the fold so that they can understand it. I just love doing that. And I like taking it and breaking it down and seeing a person understand one step at a time until they got it. And then I also like teaching the principles. I like not just showing somebody how to draw something up on a screen, but the principles behind drawing something up on the screen so that they can come up with their own philosophies and their own practices and their own way of their own style, you know? I don't want to try to make a whole lot of people like myself. I want people to be themselves, and I want them to be able to use those principles to help them forge their skill set, you know? I love talking to people and building relationships with people who are trying to program. And it turns out, and I like to watch them grow. Like I watched Darren through the years. I just love doing that. So I love to teach, and I like taking the mystery out of things. And I like taking, another thing is really, really cool about teaching people how to program. I'm showing people how to do something that may change their life, change their way they work, change their career, and it takes it from this person probably couldn't have done it before, and they thought that it was overwhelming. They thought they couldn't do it. So I guess I said all that to say, I love empowering people. I don't like to be like big Kurt, little you. I like pulling people up so that we're all programming together in the same place, in the same ways, and enjoying what we're doing, so that every day is Saturday.
I like that, Kurt. Don't ever call me Shirley.
Surely every day is Saturday.
Not a quote from a. You guys may not know. Go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish what you were going to say.
You guys may not know this, but there is a wealth of lessons and modules that Kurt has done, and they're available to people in the Accelerator program. So Kurt does an excellent job at teaching. I know that here you might just see him as somebody who adds in thoughts as I'm doing stuff, but he's turned out some really good stuff, and that's really why I brought him on. I'm like, Kurt, I some of the gold that you did. He's got his own way of things. So sometimes I kid around with him like, Kurt, put your stink on this, and then maybe I'll put my stink on what you've done, or vice versa, and we'll make cologne.
No, really, I just sometimes I just feel like the luckiest guy in the world, because I just on Saturday mornings I get this place here where I can talk to you, and I can talk to all the people that are listening in. I can actually share some of the stuff that I've got. I think about this stuff all the time, guys. I think about this all the time. So this is an outlet. This is you guys think I'm helping y'all. You guys are helping me, because I get to talk about this stuff, and I know I don't get a place. You just can't go to the grocery store and be looking at broccoli or cucumbers or something and talk about programming with somebody else that's next to you. They look at you like you're crazy, right? So here I can actually talk about programming with people that are trying to learn this stuff. I love it. It's amazing. I could,
I like it.
But we digressed really bad. So.
Well, so I had some repetitious type of things to do. So, I was creating these 4 tables, and they're all very similar, and you guys see me do this. So while I was doing that, you guys were taken by Kurt for a minute or two. That was probably more interesting than what I was doing here. So I just created these other 2 tables. Okay. So I've got a user ID here. So I'll drag that down here to the user. And then we have an environment ID. I'll drag up here to the environment. So we have relationships going everywhere, don't we? Because even with these tables up here, there's relationships. Okay, so we got the user ID that we'll drag down here. So what's great about this is, let's say we just don't sell this program, this onboarding app. Let's say it's one program in a suite of apps that we offer. Okay, we can have all kinds of apps and environments and things. So we're laying the foundation, the framework for building something huge and nice and robust that can handle a lot of complexity by setting things up in a proper way.
This is the foundation of software as a service right here.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, whenever you build an app, a lot of times you're thinking very narrow, and you probably should if you're getting to an MVP. Does everybody know what an MVP is? Kurt, do you mind sharing?
Most valuable player of a Super Bowl or a football season or
All right. So minimal viable product. If you're trying to create something, I recommend starting off small, but if you're trying to create an app, I had this situation happen a lot at FDOT, where my customers were in District 5 of Florida, and I would create an app for my users, and people would end up liking it. The people up in Tallahassee, like, oh, we see you wrote an app down there for D5, for District 5. Well, we want to roll this out to another district or all the districts statewide because we really like it. And a lot of times, me, my situation, but also there was one of me in every district is like, oh, I didn't write it in order to be used by, so you'd have to make a separate copy and a copy of the database, and everybody have their own app that they're using. And then if you do a bug fix, we got to go around to all these apps and fix the bug. And this feature might only be for this district. And so I learned quickly, no, I need to write this just in case headquarters, central office up in Tallahassee wants to roll this out to all of them. Well, I got to add fields and special tables so it's flexible enough to be used for anything. And then maybe a Department of Transportation in the state or the federal level might say, hey, I could really use that. Okay, there you go. So you might have to keep track of different states, and there's all kinds of things you need to keep in mind. Now, that's not something I'd recommend for your first few apps, but if you've written a few and you want to challenge yourself and make something flexible enough to be resold and used in a lot of different situations, this is the type of stuff that you'll need to do. Keeping an eye on the comments. So just making sure we're keeping up with it.
Yeah. So, when you talk about an MVP, usually that's, when you go into these boardrooms talking about these apps that want to be developed, they get in some lofty ideas. But the most important thing is, and of course, then you got delivery times, and you can never get anything done like over 6 months. It's always like 2 days. I got to have this done in 2 days. So that MVP is really important. What it usually is you define the core of what you need to get, right? The core. What can I do to put that out there so that people can start using it and start learning how to use it and all that good stuff. And then you can start adding some of the lofty things on the sides as time goes on. But get that core program wrote, maybe get something with a few CRUD screens so they can start entering the data in, That's your MVP when you're in these boardrooms.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. Now, the server management studio took a little while to do that save. I've got a fly in here that's bugging me. So if you see me wave like that,
Darren's got a bug. Darren's got a bug.
That's funny. All right. So I've created all these relationships. So what we need to do is we need to go over to our PowerApps application and actually bring these tables in. So let's go over here. Wow, look at all these SQL Server database tables we have already.
That's something.
Yeah, this app is growing. I thought the ticketing system that I started building here on the channel is getting really big, but this one's going to be big because I actually need this. There's a business need for this, so I need to go through all this. Go ahead.
Guess what, Darren? You can actually put your ticketing system in this. When you're done, you can have your ticketing system in this.
Or it could be like a sister app, part of the suite.
Yep.
And then I'll call it PowerApps Tutorial App Suite. Or we'll call it P365. Not 365, not O365, but we'll call it P365, Power 365. That would be funny, right?
Nice.
All right, I'm going to bring these 4 tables in, the mapping tables. We've got ourselves a many-to-many relationship with a lot of these things now. Now, whenever you bring a SQL Server table in, it's going to tell you at the top, hey, there's implicit connections. And yeah, I know. So we have these things in there. Okay, so we're going to be creating a new user or editing an existing, and we need to be able to associate it with all these different things here. So a drop-down list for the organizations won't work out here because I need to be able to select many different organizations, right? And I would probably set up, if you're a developer user, then you can get into everything, okay? So that is one thing that we should probably have in our database here for the user, okay? So I'm gonna go over to users. go over to the users here, and we need to modify this. Okay, and I'll add a bit type of field is developer bit. Okay, and then I'll save that. Taking a while. I set this up as a dev database, so it's probably not the fastest thing. Okay, but now we have that field there.
Oh yeah, so that matters, huh? A dev database, but
I don't know. I think I saved my changes to the diagram, and it took like 30 to 60 seconds. So I don't know if that has to do with it. I know I'm paying probably like 15 cents a month for the database. I set the specs up to be low, and maybe I'm experiencing some of the paying for that a little bit here. But I'm not going to give you $300 a month right now, huh?
They're not going to give you the resources that a super paying customer would have, right?
Right. All right, so I'm going to refresh users. Okay, so we've got that developer. So that might be the essential thing that we might want to have here, maybe at the top. Are they a dev user or not? Okay, so for a toggle like this, okay, we've got false default. So we'll say is not a developer. And then for the true text, is a developer. Now, keep in mind when we talk about security roles, okay, what do we have? We have user types. Now, here's a question for my mentor. I went over here, Kurt, and I said, is developer. Should I have had a user type called is developer rather than having a Boolean there? But if you look at this user type, we're associating that with a questionnaire user type.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to have a one-to-many relationship with the types because somebody can be more than one type of user then, right? So really, in this case, I think on is developers because you've got a specific reason for that. Is developers going to give you a whole host of different things that you need to be able to do, and you're not going to do that to very many people. You're going to have maybe 2 or 3 people that are going to have that now, right? And yeah, you don't need to do that, I don't think.
Very good. I'm glad you agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Now it could be interesting. I'm just sitting here thinking, you could put the user type as a string variable that would have a character representing each type. So you could have like the initial of each type of user that is, and then you could just parse that out. Now that would require in PowerApps, that might not be a real nice thing to do. Like maybe if you were in C# and you had a procedure or a function that could actually go out there and grab and parse that letter out there that you needed real fast. That might be a cheap way of doing the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to call this developer access, and I'm going to say, I don't know. Sometimes I like checkboxes more than toggles because for a toggle, I've got a true and a false text. So I think I'll just is here, I guess. Do you have any thoughts on when to use toggles, when to use checkboxes?
Not really. I think toggles are cool. I think users like toggles.
Yeah, you're right.
But I think checkboxes are better if you're in a more confined area and you got a lot of information, a lot of different types of checkboxes and stuff, maybe.
Yeah.
But users dig toggles.
Yeah, it looks more modern, I guess. Yeah. I'm going to put that there and keeping an eye on the comments. I think we're okay here. Okay. So now with a mapping table, so I pull up Darren Neese. Yeah, he's a developer. or let's say he's not a developer, but I want him to have access to more than one organization, more than one tenant, so on and so forth. What do you imagine would be a good way of change to be able to set this? And one thought is to have, I really do not like combo boxes, but a lot of times combo boxes are used for this because you have like a drop down list. It's sort of like a drop down list, but you can select one or many different things inside of that. You can select multiple things. It's an option. But I really don't like combo boxes. I almost like to do galleries of items where you select things. It looks so much better.
You know what, Darren? You know, I don't know. Either I'm sponging off you. I was the whole time you're talking, I'm like, man, do a gallery. Galleries. Don't be. I don't know. Combo boxes. I've never been a fan of them. If you're gonna go to the trouble of a combo box, do a gallery, because then you can make that thing as fancy as you want, and you're gonna take up the same amount of room. You know.
Yeah. Well, I guess the combo box does collapse. And a lot of times people get those two things confused, a combo box and a drop down. So it does collapse, but I don't want it to collapse. I want to see all my little options that I selected or not selected.
However, if you wanted to get slick, you could collapse a gallery. You could.
That's true. Yeah.
If you wanted to get slick.
I almost don't want to collapse it though.
Okay. Okay.
You talked me into it. So how do we get a nice little gallery to work with? Well, we can go over and I almost don't want to grab this one. It's got all these. I almost just want a single column type of a thing. So I'm going to go over to copy controls from here, where I know I've got a nice little gallery and a label. Okay. And I'm going to move us around. So guys, while we're here in this, I do have a request for you guys.
If you're getting anything helpful out of this, a comment or even a like really helps the channel, and lets people like you know this is good content. Much appreciated.
Very good. And I'm looking for my, I've got too many screens, Kurt. Dev user edit screen. That's what it is. I'm going to paste this over here. And I don't know that it brought the gallery over. Okay, so let's try that again. Like that, hold down Control, select the gallery, and Control C. Let's try this again. There we go. Instead of using, I'm going to move the drop down up here or down here. We actually need something like that. And then what I might have, when I space my controls out, typically I'll move it all the way up right next to it. I'll use the down arrow. And Control 0. Good. And you know, the thing is, I think typically organizations, somebody would just be part of one organization. But let's tie this into organizations. Did I bring over? Yeah, I haven't brought over that table yet. Okay, so we need to make sure that's in there. Organization, we'll probably bring over in this. We should probably bring over environment. We should probably bring over application. Make sure all those are in there. And as you add these new data sources in there, they'll add them to the bottom. Okay, and it's doing one at a time. And if you ever see an _1 or an _2 or something like that on your data source names, it means it was already there and it just created a little underscore number. Okay, so you might want to remove the extras. Okay, so it looks like organization, tenant, environment, and application were not there. That's good. So now for this gallery, I can say organization, There it is. And for this label name, there we go. So there's only one organization here. Okay. And for the background color for this gallery, I'll make it a little darker. Okay, so it looks a little more nice there. And typically, guys, when I design a screen like this, it doesn't make for an interesting YouTube video, but I'll sit here and play around with the user interface quite a bit, just sort of staring at things. And so for this template height, we might want to make this more like 40. I sort of need it to be a little more compact because think about it, we've got 4 different galleries to do here. Okay, and then we've got a bunch of user details that we need to edit. Okay, you see all these details. So now I'm wondering if I should have done some type of a tabbed type of thing.
Pop-ups.
Organizations. What's that?
Pop-ups.
Yeah, you can do pop-ups.
We can do a pop-up.
And I would imagine most users, there won't be a lot of options. Okay, so if they're only a part of one organization, the next gallery that's going to display all the tenants, you're only going to have probably most of the time just one, maybe two. And then environments, you know, there's not going to be all that many. So I could make this a little smaller here. Okay. And make this 30. There we go. And it's always good to take your time to make sure everything is nice and right, because a lot of times you copy and paste these. Okay. Make sure everything looks the way I want it to look here. Now, what we need to do before we start copying and pasting for the other is we need to have a toggle inserted in here that will keep track of this for us. And I don't even know if we need to have any type of text hanging off the side there. Just put an empty string in there. Say, yeah, I'm a part of that organization. Or I'm not. Now, I don't like that developer one is just so big. You know, it sort of looks weird.
Right.
So the height of this toggle is 28. I'm going to make it 30 at least. Make sure it's right in the middle there. And PowerApps does help us out with that a little bit. And I'm going to try to make this 30 as well. Now the text of this really should be pulling in our theme. So GBL theme. Okay, and we'll say primary dark. Okay, and then I want to bring these things back up, reposition them a little bit, and use the down arrow. And I want to make sure this is all coded right. And what we can do to find out if the user is in here is we need to query that mapping table. Okay, so for the default, we need to do a filter. Now, on this screen, we really should have a local variable that represents the record. Okay, so remember that previous screen that we started doing here, the user management screen. If they click on one of these guys, do we have some type of a good icon to click on. Let's insert an edit icon. Okay. Now, I don't really like this edit icon, but I'm going to keep it over here and use this temporarily until I find a better one. Okay. And I want to make sure I'm pulling in my theme here. So GBL theme.primary dark. And let's say something like 40 and 40. If they click on this, I want something that's similar to this, where we navigate to that dev screen. But in this case, what we're going to do for the on select for this is we'll navigate over there, but it won't be a new record. So we'll say false. Okay, let me reposition this so you guys can see my screen bigger here. But we also want to give it the record, a user record. Now, what we're currently looking at on this gallery is not, we don't have user records. What we have is a record from a view. So we actually need to go look that user up. All right. So I'm going to put a comment here. I'm going to say loc record. Okay, the main record in this case. And I'm going to go do a lookup on the users table. Okay. And, you know, I'm going to open up this code window so you guys can see this a little better here. And we're going to go look at does our view give us the user ID? Okay, so we have our views down here. Let's go see what we have here. Select top 1,000 records from that view, that query that we defined. And we have a username. Okay. Now we should be getting IDs as well from that view, to be honest. So what we can do is we can design this view. I don't like that. I want to work with my script here. Let me see if I can do that. If I script view as, alter, create a new window, it give me the script to actually modify this. Okay. So we've got after the username, I'm going to say u.id. Third, I want to see what you think of this. So I was doing the view wasn't giving us the user ID. So what I'm doing is I'm adding this in here, user ID. Because if you look at this data here, I wanted to pass the user off to the other screen, right? Yeah. And in order to do a lookup, I want to find the primary key. Well, I don't have the primary key. Well, this view should give me the primary key for each of these 4 things that we're looking at, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
Want to make so not only, guys, are you hearing from a seasoned developer like myself, if I may say so, you're also hearing it from a second seasoned developer who actually has decades more than I do. Kurt, when did you started coding back in the 60s or something, right? Didn't you used to code with little punch cards and you put rubber bands around it? Like you go back a ways, right?
But that wasn't the 60s, though. Lord, I'm old. Yeah, but I did start with punch cards. I did.
Punch cards, really?
RPG and RPG2 and COBOL, the old days. The old
RPG, isn't that
mainframe.
like a bazooka?
Yeah, it's report program generator, but we used to call it randomly punched garbage. But hey, I mean, I learned a lot on that stuff, though. I'm not, it's always easy to go from down there up. But imagine if we took away Windows and we took away the operating systems we have today with all the point and click, we'd be in trouble. Some people would be in trouble, Not me.
Have you seen that meme little video where this guy's getting robbed? And it's an older guy. Hey, give me all your money. He's like, oh, call an ambulance, call an ambulance. But he pulls out a gun and goes, but not for me. Like, that's what I have all these like memes and videos in my head when you say a statement, but not for me.
Yeah, so you have
I digress. What's that?
You have art imitating life, life imitating art. So you have memes imitating Kurt and Kurt imitating memes. Is that what you're saying here? Yeah.
Well, it's funny over the years, the way in which we communicate, you look back at the Egyptians and their hieroglyphics, but now we text each other back and forth over text or whatever, and we've got LOLs and we've got emojis, and we're just going back to hieroglyphics now.
We constantly keep, re-going. It's the same way in computers too, right? Computers used to be nothing but dumb terminals hooked up to System 360s and, mainframes and minis. But now we had PCs come in, took it away from all that. But guess what? Now we are hooked up to servers that are hooked up to gateways. And really, my desktop is not even really being used. My internet card is being used. I'm a dumb terminal here. I'm storing stuff out on a cloud somewhere, not on my PC. So there's just we just keep coming around full circle.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to alter this view, and so you guys get to see my little T-SQL view. Hey, people pay big money for this. This is a skill, guys. Writing queries in a SQL Server view, doing a select statement. We're doing joins. We're doing all kinds of really cool stuff here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and execute this whole script, and it's going to give me tenant IDs, user IDs, and so on. Okay. So this is good. This is good to have this. So if we have a little dashboard that allows us to see a bunch of things, we need to be able to grab IDs from each of those 4 things and perhaps pass them on. Okay.
What are you guys thinking about this? You guys getting stuff out of this? Is this going down a direction you guys need to go down? Or I'd like to hear what some of you think about this.
So since I changed the view, what I need to do is go to the view here, and I'm going to refresh this. And we're going to say ID equals, and now we should have those new fields there. I'm going to be looking for user ID. Okay. Now that should give me a whole record. We're looking up user by their ID. This item.user ID. Okay. So what am I messing up here? We can't evaluate your formula because the context variable types are incompatible with the types of values in other places in your app.
I've been seeing this a lot, that error a lot.
Yeah.
Lately. It's like it's a new error message that I haven't,
okay. What we'll do, so if a different screen or that screen itself we're trying to go to has other local variables, okay. So if I open up, let's say I'll just put a little label down here for a little test, and I'll just type LOC. What are all my locals? New record. Oh, there's already a record here. Oh, that's interesting. Well, what type is that? Okay, what record? Where does that? So we'll go into the onVisible. Do we have anything that grabs a record? No. Okay. Now we copied this edit screen So what we need to do is go look for that variable name. Now we should be able to, they added these things over here called variables. And if I go look at context variables and I go into a screen, so have you guys explored all this? Go into a screen here. So this is dev user edit screen, dev user edit screen. Now what are all the locals? Okay, here we have a variable called loc record. Definitions. There is an icon on the screen. You see that? In a gallery new screen listing. I'm going to click on that. Okay. And something creates that from, it actually creates it from this screen. Okay. I'm looking and it's this little icon. Isn't that interesting? Well, that's the one that was giving us the, the problem on, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a little confused. Okay. Nick says it's great. I think you were asking feedback from people, and says it's great. So it's good to hear and see you guys are following along here. So what I'm thinking, Kurt, is sometimes in these situations where PowerApps does get confused, I just back out of the application and I reopen it and see if we still have the same problem.
Yeah, I ran into that. I've done that a few times. Yeah, when moments like this, I think PowerApps is a toy language, right? But then I got to remind myself, what is PowerApps really doing here? I mean, you think about it. We're doing the front end, we're doing the server side, and we're doing all the middleware in between. It's doing all of that. So that we were just talking about that yesterday. We're doing some development, and we're like, I love programming. I just don't like having to chase down all these DLLs and chasing down all these different libraries that you got to have to make the thing work, and that's what happens when you're working with some of these other languages. But PowerApps, you're not having to do that. You're here in one location, you're programming, it's doing all that work for you. So we get irritated and frustrated when we got to go and back out because it gets confused over something. But think about what it's doing, man. Yeah. So it's doing quite a bit. So to call it a toy language is really not accurate, but sometimes you feel that way,
Now look at what I did here. I put 3 O's in lookup. Isn't that funny? Okay, so now it has invalid arguments. Okay, well, at least we're getting a little somewhere. First of all, our tape called user, is that what we called it here?
Users.
Is that what we called it? So if we go over to our
users,
we called our table users. Why do we give it a plural name? I was trying to stay consistent and keep everything singular.
And that's why you do that. So that's why you try to stay consistent.
You know what's nice about me making the mistake and it not being consistent? Because user singular is a reserved keyword within PowerApps. It's a function.
So see there, that's why you did that.
It's good that I did that, guys.
Why you did that.
All right, now we're cooking.
So it's a feature.
Yeah, it's not a bug, guys. It's a feature. No extra charge. All right, so we came over here, and now we've got a record that we can tie into for this little thing here. Okay, so we're gonna filter, on user organization. Okay, and we're gonna filter where the user ID equals, and then we got loc record. Okay, and we'd say ID. Okay, so that should filter it down all the organizations. Okay, and then what we're also going to say is we should also say and. Well, first of all, we have an error here, and I guess that makes sense because filter is going to give us a bunch of rows. Okay, so what I want to say is and the organization ID, okay, is this item dot org. And it's taken a while to actually keep up here. So my computer's doing something a little weird here. You see that the cursor, oh, that's a problem. Wow. I really don't like that. Come back a little later. Status breakpoint. Well, I don't want to I wish it would just refresh on its own, and ain't that something?
Wow. That happens to me
Frustration.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Experience. That's what we call that. Experience.
We were doing some C# coding earlier this week, and we realized really quick, got reminded really quick that we needed to be hitting Control S a little more often, you know. Phew. Now you notice this little image is taking so long to come up. Remember we did this as a test last week.
Yeah.
It's like let's I downloaded a 20 megabyte file there. How small should it be? I'm like, maybe 100 kilobytes. And so this is 20 megs. So you see how long it took to load up? I need to resite it and re-upload it. That's what I need to do. It's read only because you already have it editing somewhere else. No, I don't. I'm going to overwrite that.
Because we didn't exit properly. Yeah. We didn't exit properly.
All right, let's see how much it saved here. All right, we still have this. So I'm going to click on the edit, go over here. I'm going to have to rewrite some of my code, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ain't that something?
The humanity.
So there's somebody watching this video or somebody's on live. And they're like, oh, Darren went too fast. All right, well, I'm going to do it again for you.
See, that was planned. It's all part of the plan.
Yeah.
This was all part of the plan. He planned that refresh needing to be done. It's all part of the plan.
We'll filter the user organization. That's the mapping table. And we need to say where the user ID equals local record, okay, .id. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control S just in case it crashes again at this point. And then we'll say, oh, I took out my cursor there and put the cursor back. And we'll say, and the organization ID equals. Okay. Now we're going to get the org ID from the gallery we're currently sitting in because we have all the organizations listed here, right? So we'll say this item dot org. No, it's going to be ID. I'm going to Control S. Okay, and it's giving me a red squiggly because this toggle default value needs to be a Boolean. Yes, no, true, false. And simply what I'm going to say here is, do we at least have one value? Okay. So what I'm going to say is, and based on those two things, a user ID and an org ID, that should make it be one, one value there. But we could say count row. Now, there's a lot of different ways we could do this, but if we could count rows and greater than 0, then it should be checked off. And if we filter this, it's going to definitely be under 2,000 records. That gives us a delegation warning. So based on that information I just said there, we're not going to be worried about delegation.
And if it does go over that, then you don't really care because you're making so much crazy money because you got so many tenants. You don't care. It's like, oh, I'm okay. I'm making too much money, man. It's all right.
So what we could do is say first and say ID. Okay. So instead of trying to count them up, we can say, well, just give me the first record. And the first record might give you a null. And then you could say is blank. Okay. And it moved it over to true, right? So you'd have to negate that by saying not. So that's another way you could do it. Now, which way do you let her, Kurt?
I like the first way you did it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, because you got the delegation issues, I guess, but
it's not. I mean, it's going to warn us, but it's never going to be an issue because of this filter.
right.
Now, we do have a little issue up here. I was wanting to show, okay, LOC record. If I wanted to show, let's say, the ID of the current record, we could show that here. Now, what I like to do is if I have something up here like this, just for testing, we can verify that a good record came in here. Okay, so we've got a local variable there. Then we have a local variable here, if I can get this lined up right. Log new record, okay, and display that just for debugging purposes. And then I'm going to give it a nice little background color to make it look out of place because I don't want users to ever see this. I'll change the visible to global show debugging. Okay. And what you'll notice here, guys, is I got a little debugging toggle that will show things and hide things. Okay, so it's built into my template there. Okay, so let's see here. Let's do something similar now that we've got all this set up. Okay, let's do something like this for what's the next thing that we need for organization? Probably tenant, if I'm not mistaken here. Yeah. So we have tenant that we need to work with. Okay. So I'm going to say tenants. Now we were going to talk about validation.
Well, we did. We talked quite a bit about it.
Yeah. But as far as like a practical example that we'll need to sort of show some, as we get to some of the other fields, some more validation and things here.
Yeah, once you get your screen set up, then we can go in and do some validating on it. We can talk about the different types of validation we're going to do within that. You know,
yeah,
maybe even 2 or 3 screens.
Yeah. So we got our tenants. Okay.
Yeah, but I thought we had a really good discussion on the on validation in general. Just an overview, you know.
Yeah. Now here's a question for you. Let's say there's tons and tons, and this guy isn't a developer. Should we only show tenants in this gallery that have been selected here? So we're making this game more complicated, but it's going to make it more user-friendly, right? Why should I see, if there's 1,000 tenants in the database, why should I see them all if I'm only a part of this Neese organization?
We need to keep everything encapsulated. You know, so again, we're into that liability issue, right? So it's got to be encapsulated. It's got to seem like they're the only tenant in the world. They have no idea what's going on outside of that, you know.
I get this question a lot. People will come, either students or people like, hey, I need an app built. But listen, it's really important that people can't see what they're not supposed to see. I'm like, of course. And they're like, oh, I guess that's easy. I'm like, yeah, if you know what you're doing. You know, if you
build it right, you build it right.
Yeah. So you guys are seeing us build it right here. All right. So we need to filter this. We need to look at all of the organizations that have been selected here. Interesting. I need to filter this.
So you got a tenant ID and you've got an organization ID, right?
Mm-hmm. You do.
Actually, really, all you need is all the organization IDs equal that. That's all you need right there in your tenant table.
Okay, so yeah, if we're looking at all of them that have been selected there. Okay, so let's pull up the ERD diagram. Okay, so Darren is down here in this user table. Okay, and we've got this Neese LLC up here. Okay, and we went in here and we said, yeah, Neese, Darren, yes. So there's going to be a record here. And we're trying to populate all the tenants that would be applicable for Darren. And you're saying, yeah, we've got the org ID and we got the user
ID. That's where
ID.
Collections are nice. That's where collections are nice, right? Because you can You can go through you can set that up through a for all, populate a collection of all the tenants that have that all the organization IDs that Darren Neese has, right?
Yeah. So I think it's good that we actually have a relationship between tenants and orgs there.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. I'm trying to think through this, the best way of doing this. Now, one way we could do it that I don't like is there could be more than one organization, and let's say Darren is a part of Neese and he's a part of Super PowerApps, or he's a part of the third organization. Okay, do I display in the tenants all the ones for the selected organization at a time, or if I've selected 3 organizations he's a part of, do I show all the tenants that span all of those?
Nope. I think each one needs to be, and I think that Darren would expect that too. Yeah. If I'm dealing with Neese stuff, I just want to deal with those tenants. If I'm dealing with, another one, because otherwise you're going to have to pick through all that then, as a user. No, you select an organization. You want to see the tenants for that one organization.
Okay. So in that case, Kurt, now think this through with me, and I'm inviting all the viewers to do this with us. Okay. So this is where you're making decisions that are really going to affect you, and you think ahead when the users see this, like, oh, this isn't doing what I was expecting. You like my voice there, Kurt?
Reminds me of somebody.
Doesn't remind me of anybody. We have a save button at the bottom. Okay. And are we going to do all this? Are we going to do all these mapping table saves in the save button? Or are we going to do it right here? Because if I check off all the tenants for Neese's and then I select something else, a second one, then these things are going to change. Well, is this save button going to pick up on all those changes? Are we going to store that anywhere? Something to think about. It makes it a little more complicated. You need to think about where these saves, or we could sit here and do a save to the database as soon as they click on one of these things,
So that's okay. So I had something similar to this where I was dealing with employees and I was dealing with training, and this was kind of something where I was actually. And then I had a save at the end of that, so they could go in there and they could interact both directions with it. And that's kind of what you're talking about here. So then what I did was I had a collection set up that was storing all that stuff, and then I stored the end result of that collection. I saved that end result. So I guess in answer to what you're talking about, I think it could be both, right? So you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna create that in the interface where you're saving something to a collection. And then you're going to persist that information into the data tables when they hit a save button.
Yeah. Now, something that I do not like about toggles and also check boxes and option buttons, you see where it has a rectangle around it? I hate that. I don't know why they put that in there. I think it makes it look a little not so great.
I want you to go. So that toggle, are you storing information in that toggle right now? Are you doing stuff in there? Did you put in information in that?
What does that mean? Information. So we've got stuff inside the default. Okay. That's all that we have so far.
Okay.
Were you going somewhere with that?
Well, I noticed that when you were clicking it back and forth, it wasn't doing that bounce back and forth. I'm having a lot of troubles for myself using the toggle, stopping that going back and forth. And I don't know what I'm doing in that.
Yeah, a lot of times you could have like a recursive relationship here, because when the underlying data for default changes, then it's going to change that toggle to on or off, right? And what does that do? A lot of times they'll actually invoke an on-change event.
Yeah.
So that's why I put code that updates it in on-check or uncheck, and not the on-change. Or you could use the on-select instead of the on-change. So I've seen the on-change being invoked whenever, not when the user clicks on something, but when the default is actually controlling it.
Okay,
Frustrations, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to look at that and see if I'm using the on changed. If that's okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, I feel like we almost need to. I'm trying to think through this, and it may not make it very interesting as a video. I'm just sort of sitting here going really slow. But this is how I develop a screen. I'm thinking about all these different scenarios and how the user is going to experience this, you know. So I think what I might want to have is all the ones that are selected. And you could do it either way, like the way that you were talking, where it's only showing you what was selected. In this scenario, now in your scenario in that app that you were building, it was different than our use case here. So it might actually hold true. Like if I was writing your app, I'm like, oh yeah, we need to keep these in separate collections on the screen before we hit save. In this case, there's not going to be a lot of tenant, like users are typically going to be a part of one organization or one tenant. So
yeah, can we switch now?
So I think I might actually want to keep track, filter this down by all the tenants that are part of the organizations that they've selected. Okay. And so what I need to do is filter this based on, so if they have 3 orgs selected, I want to have all the tenants that are associated with those different organizations. And I'm already starting to think about how we might go about this. Okay. So, or the tenant. Okay, let's go look at our ERD diagram. I want to show the tenants. Oh, that's weird. I'm starting to get an echo now. That's weird. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, now I don't hear an echo. Okay. Okay, so that gallery is tied to this database table, and we do have a relationship here. Okay, so we've got org ID. Okay, so let me get a listing of org IDs here. How are we going to do that? Okay, so take a look at this. I'm going to add a label. Sometimes you just need to visualize something that's going on inside your application. Okay, and I'm going to put this here, and the users don't need to see this. Okay, I'm going to give it a weird background color that clashes, and I'm going to make it only available to, I'll just leave it visible right now. And I want to look at this gallery, and we should rename this gallery Gallizations, say user edit orgs. Okay, and we'll reference that by name. Okay, and inside this label here, I'll look at this. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all of them. I'm going to filter the data in that gallery by saying .all items. Okay, so we're going to filter that, and we're going to pull back and look at only the ones where the toggle. Okay. Now let's look at the toggles inside here. The toggle name in here, we should name toggle selected org for user. Okay, that's going to be the name of our toggle. And we're going to filter in here wherever it's selected. Okay. Now that's going to give us a table of values. And I'm going to take that table of values and I'm going to do a concat. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get at all of the org IDs. Okay. Okay. So we'll grab that with the ID But I'm also going to append a little semicolon in there. Okay, so the numbers don't run together. Okay, so if I were to run this and select something, there is the ID or one of the IDs. If I selected another org, perhaps what I should do, guys, is go over to the org and edit the top 200. And let's add another org here, and we'll call this LLC, okay? And let's run this query again. Okay, so we actually have more than one there. I'm going to go over Kurt. I just created an organization called Kurt LLC. Hope you don't mind.
Nope.
So I'll refresh.
Big dreams. I have big dreams here.
So what I did, I got this little label that's going to help us filter this over here. Okay, you guys are going to see how my mind works when I create a screen, a pretty complicated screen, by the way, it's going to look like. Okay, so boom, he's going to be part of the Neese LLC. So the ID for Neese is 1, but let's say he's a part of the Kurt LLC as well. So I have a semicolon in there. So now when I filter this, I can see where the org ID is in this string that I've constructed. Okay, I'm going to show you my code here. Do you like that? Is that slick or not?
I don't know. I mean, it's slick. It's slick. It's very slick. I like it. However, two things. I got two things in my mind. One is I don't know if it's good to have all the. If you've selected, if Darren has he's got 2 organizations,
right,
and you're showing both of those tenants, you can get it confused over which one's which. You can have multiple tenants in each organization.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got 15 tenants in one and 15 in the other, how do you know which ones are which? You're gonna have to do something to differentiate those in that below one, like make them different colors or something, or something like that.
Now, something we could do. Check this out, Kurt. So these are tenants, and inside the tenant table, I do have the org ID. Okay, so I'm going to go in here, put a parenthesis in there and so I'm addressing your concern, and this is how I'd handle the concern if it were to come up. And I would say this item dot org ID. Okay, what do you think about that? To sort of
that helps.
And we could say org ID. There's that.
It'd be cool if we could take if each one had an icon or something, some kind of a picture that you could put with it, like
yeah,
that would be kind of neat.
We get this really complicated.
Well, if they've got a a photo that's their logo, you can put their logo.
That's
and
true.
Their tenants, they could put their pictures on there, maybe.
Absolutely. Do you already have a logo for your LLC?
Of course not.
Big one. What we could do. I mean, we could assign different icons or something like that. But
this is good for now, though. This is good for now.
In fact,
we're trying to come up with an MVP here for today.
Right. That is true. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter this down. Okay, I've got this label sitting out here, and I'm going to call this label, and I'm going to call this selected org ID. Okay, and I'm going to use that name over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a special operator. Okay. Now an equal sign, less than, greater than, that's an operator, right? And I'm going to filter this where the organization ID is in, okay, in that label. Okay. Now, just keep in mind, if you have over 2,000 organizations, you're going to have to rework this in some way. Um, and really, because I see this double line here, a user isn't going to be a part of 2,000 organizations, even though we might have 2 million organizations in our database.
And if so, we can make an entire we could give that user this entire program. Yeah.
It's true. You probably have enough time and money if you have millions of people using this thing to maybe rework it, but you won't have to because a user isn't going to be a part of it. Okay, so
let's go backward. Hold on, man. You just
Okay.
threw some stuff in there, Darren. Now,
Yeah.
okay. So you were checking is in. Let's go back to that line there. What'd you do?
There you go.
Where'd you go? There it is. So what you're doing, I just want to kind of review this a little bit for people that are, because this is kind of different than what we normally do, So now what you're doing is you got that little text string out there, and people were going, well, why are you putting that 1 and 2 sitting out there, right? Right. So what you're going to do now is you're going to just looking at that ID and you're seeing, is that ID in that text string? And if it's in that text string, then that's a good one. Now, having said that, walking through this, now I got a question for you, Darren.
Yeah.
Can we get confused somehow with that?
We could. There is a flaw in here that's really big.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, we could have an organization ID that has 11 as an ID. And if I'm part of the organization 1, well, there's a 1 and an 11, right?
And 11. Yep. Now you got, yep.
So how should we change this? And we've got semicolons and there's a delimiter. So what we could do is say where 1 ampersand or 1 semicolon is in there. Now, let's think about this.
Or you have a business rule that puts a 0 in front of that 1 when you're storing that. You could do that.
Now, even if we have a 1 and then a semicolon, well, we could have a organization ID of 1-1. And then there would be a flaw there. Well, as long as you go in here and perhaps what we need is a little space in there. Okay. This is not going to be a space inside of an ID. Okay. This is just one way of handling this type of stuff. So just little considerations that sort of go into doing this type of stuff.
Now, what would be wrong with just going through and doing a for all with your 2 different organizations and selecting and collecting the IDs and then doing a filter based on that?
Okay. Let's go down that. So what would be wrong with doing a for all on the organizations, you said?
Yeah, you're looping through all that to capture all the IDs.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the problem is you can't be dynamic in this tenant with the filter. You can't be dynamic enough.
I think if you write it any other way or most of the ways that come to mind, you're going to have a delegation problem.
Yeah.
And So keep in mind what we're working with here. It isn't what's in the database. This screen is going to change the database. So as we're checking off these toggles and check boxes, we're entering some information. This could be a new user. There's no data in the database yet. We need to be able to filter things based on what they're selecting in these galleries. Okay. Yeah. And so we didn't have to use this label. What we could do is we could have done this concat and actually put it inside of this. But what I did is I sort of unpacked it a little bit so it's not so complicated. Okay. So yeah. So because we put a space after the semicolon, I'm trying to think this through here. Yeah. So we've got put a space before and after that. So I just want any like ones to get the tail end of something, you know. Okay, so we got the IDs here. We'll go over here, and what I'm missing now, for some reason, is we filtered this. We've lost the tenant names. That's a little weird, huh? I think I'll go down here and refresh this. Okay, there we go. Now, if I unselect Neese, now you don't have any tenants for you. So we're going to get a blank there. But if I select this one, I'm going to get them. Okay. All right, very good. So, you know, I have a question, which is, now that you've seen this, now of course we need to build onto this to make it a full edit screen. But question is, what video should you watch next, right?
For some reason, YouTube thinks you're going to like this video next. Let's see if they're right. Or you can select this playlist, which I've selected for you based on the content you're currently watching. Guys, gotta hurry, click one of them. Otherwise, YouTube's going to autoplay some other video.